Welcome to WhistleStop Tour Part 3. This tutorial is aimed at the treasurer and other financial people within the club. Unfortunately, it's going to involve a lot of me talking and not much happening on screen, but that's the nature of finance. The first thing I want to get over is that all the nominal codes and sales ledger codes you're going to see today are from the Derbyshire Lancashire Gliding Club. When you start Freeflight, the first thing we will do is ask you to send us a CSV file with your own QuickBooks codes in and all your opening balances. So what you will see when you're live are your codes, all the ones you've been used to over the years. Nothing will change. And the first thing I'm going to do is just quickly remind us of the couple of transactions that we put in parts 1 and part 2, because again we're going to be tracking those through the system. Now, the first thing we're going to be looking at are some of the functions that the administrators can do before we dive into the actual finance section. These are mostly put on by people who, if at all, will only have a very rudimentary concept of double entry bookkeeping. So we try and make it as easy as possible for these people. All the menu items are in Gliding Club language, and wherever possible we link everything to a record in a product file, so that all the sales analysis codes and the cost analysis codes are automatic. Basically, the golden rule is if we sell it, there'll be a product for it somewhere in the product file. So now we're just going to receive a payment from a member, which needs to be recorded against their account. Obviously, I'm going to select me. The payment type in this case is going to be a check. So we just enter a little bit more description. Normally we put a check number in there, just so that we can marry up the bank reconciliation later, and then the amount of the check. Normally leave the quantity at 1. The next kind of item we're going to enter is a kind of special, because technically it's a purchase ledger transaction, and that Swiss is where a member buys something on behalf of the club and then just says, oh, credit my account. So this is a special in that it won't affect the amounts going into the bank account or coming from the bank account. It will just put the correct codes in. It will report it as a credit to account, and then it will be deducted from the amount that you need to pay into the bank. We'll see that happening later on when we get into the finance section and look at the reporting structure there. Now, entering a charge we dealt with in parts 1 and 2, and crediting credit an account is a special which I'll deal with at a later tutorial. Basically, it's a transaction that doesn't affect the bank account. Recording a site payment is for when people pay for their trailers and things like that. And the rest are pretty self-explanatory. The ones I'm going to focus on are the two at the bottom, the ones shown as do the banking and cash to bank. These are essentially the same thing, except that one works on checks and the other works on the cash accounts. So the scenario here is exactly the same as QuickBooks in actual fact. Members come into the office, they drop a check off, and then they clear off to fly. Those checks are not at that stage in the current account, so they're classified as unallocated. When the office administrator then gathers them together and goes to the bank and puts a tick against each check that she's taking, this then puts these checks into the current account, and they'll be picked up later in the next section. And finally, the cash to bank. It would be really nice if all the payments that came in as cash could be automatically transferred to the bank as is, but unfortunately life isn't like that. Sometimes we use the cash in the office to buy stamps, coffee, pay local suppliers when they turn up. So it's not always possible to transfer the precise amount of money. So all this allows you to do is to specify an amount that you want to move from the petty cash account into the current account. Obviously, you put a reason for that. Normally, it's just a surplus amount we want to move over. This facility can also be used by the treasurer to move cash from the current account to, for example, a high interest deposits account. Let's dive over to the finance section, have a look around at what's what here. First thing is that we set a reporting period. That saves you entering the date every time you want to pull a report up, so most of the reports will work within those dates. We'll look at the latest banking report. We see there those two checks that our office administrator took to the bank. We look at any unallocated funds. At the moment there aren't any. And the next one is an important one, the QB cut-off date. Whilst we're still transitioning information over to a third-party accounts package, it's important that once that information has been transferred, that we don't allow any further changes to the financial records in Freeflight. The QB cut-off date will tell the system that changes to the financial transactions are not allowed before that date. Naturally, we still have to allow changes to the flight logs because we have to maintain both the pilot logs and the aircraft logs to the correct standard. But the operators will be alerted if they try to change those records to say that any differences to the pricing will have to be entered as a separate entry in this current period. In the sales ledger folder, you have a day book. This is one of the items where you still need to put a date in because you can go back in time if you want to check any information out, or you can run it for a specific period. Those are the two entries that we put in today. Let's take a quick look at the different types of sales figures. We'll look at the member sales first. You can see the wing tape that we put in for Chris Knapp, my flight from last week where we did part 1 and 2. And then we'll take a look at the non-member sales. And all of this is basically to give the treasurer an opportunity to check the work of other people and to make any necessary adjustments before running the final QuickBook reports. We can do the same for the payments. We can look at non-member payments particularly. We can look at payments from members. And more importantly, we can look at all the payments received. We can check that they've been allocated to the correct accounts and make any adjustments where necessary. Now, of all the reports, the most important ones are the QuickBooks reports, and later on we'll look at the bank account reconciliation. I'll let these run because I'm running out of resources on my Mac and it keeps crashing. The main ones we'll need to look for are the summary reports. The others are purely there to verify the figures before producing the summaries, and the summaries are the ones that you will transfer over into QuickBooks. Now the final section I want to deal with is the nominal ledger, which is where you'll find all the bank reconciliation information. The first thing we need to do is update the period balances, and this will update the figures from the last QuickBooks cut-off date. So the bank, you'll see, is a tree structure which allows you to drill down into it. Once you've selected the item you want to look at, you can simply click on the line and it will bring up the information. Let's have a look at the current account. And there you'll find all the transactions, including the money transfer from petty cash into the current account. So effectively, this becomes your bank reconciliation. Now, I will put a print button on there to make life easier. I just haven't got around to it yet. But you can visually see on screen and check that against the bank statement. I'll also put some little tick boxes on there, so that once you verify that they've appeared on the statement, you can click them and they won't trouble you again. Quick look at the petty cash. Let's see what should be in the office, so we can go along and check it at any point to make sure that it balances. And finally, let's take a look at orphaned transactions. Orphaned transactions are essentially something that's slipped through the net and doesn't have a sales ledger analysis code. Generally speaking, there won't be any, but there may be occasions, particularly if somebody's on holiday and somebody new comes into the office to help out, when they get things slightly wrong. So I may actually move this to the first folder because it's an item that you should really run before you produce the QuickBook reports. In this case, we'll see that there's no QuickBooks code allocated, and as it's a flight, it should have gone to our launches and soaring number, which I think is 8142. We'll find out in a minute. Yeah, it is. Okay, so that's now been correctly coded. So everything should be fine now. That was the only one on the list, so we're now free to run the QuickBooks reports. The final section, the flight analysis, is really for the marketing man, and that's me, because it helps me keep a track of the trial lesson sales and how we're doing on a month-by-month basis, as well as look at various club statistics. And that's it. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Any questions, contact your local liaison person and they will get hold of me, or contact me directly if you have my email address. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.